Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little sootier, the grimy, gaslit world of Victorian London. A city of grand ambition, industrial marvels, and soul-crushing poverty. This wasn't the London of Sherlock Holmes or Queen Victoria's palace garden parties. This was the London of fog, filth, and foul smells, a place where surviving the day was a small miracle. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, and the first thing you see is your brother's foot. Inches from your face, grimy, and twitching slightly from some horrifying dream. Welcome to your one and only room. It's not a bedroom, it's not a living room, it's the room. And it's everything. You share it with 6 other souls, 1 bed, 2 chairs with questionable structural integrity, and a rat who's been around so long you're considering charging him rent. There's no wallpaper, just patches of wall where something used to be. The ceiling leaks when it rains, and even when it doesn't, it drips something that you've decided not to investigate. The fireplace is fake, the air is damp. The floor creaks like it's trying to warn you of your own mortality. You're wrapped in a thin wool blanket that hasn't been washed since the Crimean War, and the pillow under your head is made of straw, possibly mixed with someone's long-forgotten sock. There's no plumbing. That bucket in the corner? That's the toilet, bath, and emergency water source, depending on the time of day and level of desperation. You've learned to breathe through your mouth in the mornings. It helps. A bit. There's one window, if you can call it that. So covered in soot and fog, it mostly just lets in the sound of cartwheels, shouting vendors, and someone aggressively coughing 3 doors down. You try not to think about the fact that the window opens onto an alley where the butcher dumps his offcuts and your neighbour keeps his goat. Every morning begins with a family-wide shuffle. You dress under blankets to avoid the cold. You swap spots around the wash basin like it's a game of musical chairs with fewer prizes, and someone always knocks over the chamber pot. And yet somehow, this room is still home. You know which floorboard creaks, which corner drips, and which window pane rattles just before your neighbour yells about his stolen boots. You know the smell, the dust, the strange sense of belonging. But make no mistake, this room isn't comfortable. It isn't cute. It's a place that prepares you for the day outside by making you suffer a little before you even leave. And trust me, the streets won't be kinder. You stumble out the front door, still blinking sleep from your eyes and clutching half a crust of bread, and immediately walk face first into a wall of choking fog. But this isn't the romantic, candle-lit haze they write about in novels. No, this is London's infamous pea super, and it's like trying to breathe through a coal stuffed sock. The sky is grey, the street is grey, the air is grey. You can't see the end of your own arm, and you're pretty sure that's a lamppost ahead. Or possibly a horse. Could go either way. This fog isn't just weather. It's murderous. Formed by the happy marriage of industrial coal smoke and natural mist, it clings to everything. It seeps into your lungs, coats your throat, and gives your clothes that signature London look, soot-streaked and mildly flammable. You cough. Everyone coughs. It's part of the local soundtrack, like church bells and clattering hooves. Children hack like lifelong smokers. Old men cough so hard they rattle windows. And doctors, well, they recommend moving to the countryside, which is great advice if you own land and your own lungs. The smell is a complex bouquet. Chimney soot, sewage vapour, horse manure, and last night's overcooked cabbage. If perfume makers bottled this, it would be called Eau de Urban Misery. And it gets into everything. Your hair, your bread, your one nice shirt you wear to funerals and job interviews. It's all stained with the scent of progress. The worst part? No one's surprised. People go about their day blindly, literally. Street lamps burn all day long and still don't help. You hear someone trip in the alley next to you, and someone else swear as their umbrella disappears into the mist like a ghost ship. At night, it gets even thicker. The fog curls through door cracks. It blankets the tenements, and if you don't keep a candle lit, you might walk straight into the fireplace, or worse, your neighbour's lap. So yes, the air in Victorian London doesn't just choke you, it brands you, smokes you, and dares you to keep breathing, and you haven't even reached the street market yet. You've made it out of bed, out of your smoke-soaked hovel, and down into the day's grey beginnings. Now your stomach groans. Time for breakfast. Except, breakfast in Victorian London is less of a meal and more of a ritual in lowered expectations. If you're part of the working class, and you almost certainly are, breakfast isn't eggs or toast or a hearty pile of bacon. It's a crust of bread that could double as a roof tile. Maybe some porridge, if the oats weren't eaten by the rats in the cupboard. And tea. Always tea. Not because it's comforting, but because it's boiled. And anything that's been boiled probably won't kill you. Milk? Only if you can afford it, and even then it's a gamble. It might be watered down or worse, preserved with formaldehyde by enterprising vendors who think child-safe is a loose guideline. Sugar is expensive. Butter? A legend. Jam? Only if your aunt died and left you some in her will. If you're lucky enough to work in a factory or live near a bakery, you might sniff warm bread on the air. Don't get excited. That's not your bread. That's someone else's breakfast, likely belonging to a man with a hat and a last name on his door. And if you're really down on your luck, an orphan, an out-of-work widow, or just someone who lost their job to a machine, you might find yourself queuing at a workhouse for a ladle of greyish gruel. It's warm. It's edible. That's about the kindest thing one can say. Street vendors might offer fried potatoes or old meat pies, but beware. The meat is unidentifiable, the oil ancient, and the odds of intestinal regret high. Still, the smell is oddly inviting. When you're starving, everything smells like hope. You eat quickly, standing, wrapped in your coat like a cloak of denial. There's no dining room, no soft morning music, just cold fog, clanging wheels, and the distant sound of someone already yelling about stolen coal. And now, bellies only half full and spirits not at all. It's time to step into the real monster, the streets of London. Welcome to the streets of Victorian London, a sprawling, chaotic organism, pulsing with smoke, mud, and misery. Every step you take is a calculated risk, and the street doesn't care if you're late for work or just trying to cross the road without being trampled to death. First things first, there are no sidewalks. Or if there are, they're so narrow, cracked and crowded that using them is a polite suggestion, not a safety guarantee. The main road is a mucky battlefield of hoofbeats, wagon wheels, and ankle-deep sludge. Horse-drawn carts barrel past at terrifying speeds. Carriages clip corners. One false move, and you're face down in a puddle that smells like something died in it, because something probably did. Now, mind the gutters. They run down the middle of the street, carrying all the city's discarded glory. Rotting vegetables, dead rats, coal ash, the contents of chamber pots dumped from upstairs windows, and the occasional shoe, foot optional. Crossing them without slipping requires Olympic-level balance, or a very long stick and no dignity. But it's not just the terrain that's out to get you. It's the people too. You've got street urchins darting around like caffeinated squirrels, pickpockets brushing against your coat, accidentally, and vendors yelling about eels, kippers, or something vaguely called meat. Everyone's yelling, all the time, about everything. There are also the coppers, trying to look important, while ignoring most of what's happening around them. If someone gets stabbed, they'll eventually wander over, assuming the shift hasn't ended, or they haven't been bribed to look the other way. The air, still thick with smog, now flavoured with horse manure and pipe smoke. And in the distance, you hear the bells of St. Paul's, Or maybe that's just your ears ringing after someone shouted in your face about chimney soot. Oh, and if it rains? Which it does. Often, the streets turn into rivers of filth. No one offers an umbrella. No one even looks surprised. You just pull your coat tighter and trudge through it, hoping your boots don't dissolve. And this is just your commute. Survive the streets, and you might live to find a job. Or at least something that pays enough to keep bread on the table and rats off your toes. You've navigated the sewers masquerading as streets, dodged horses and hooligans, and now it's time to make your living, if the city allows it. In Victorian London, a job isn't a title. It's a test of endurance, a way to slowly fall apart while clinging to the illusion of stability. If you're a man, you might be lucky enough to land work in a factory. 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, for wages that wouldn't feed a well-behaved cat. The noise is deafening. The air is full of soot, metal shavings and regret. If you lose a finger in the machine, don't worry. There are 20 children lined up behind you ready to take your spot. Don't fancy machinery. Try bricklaying, or hauling coal, or working in the docks where your back gives out by 30 and your teeth fall out by 40. If you live that long. Women, you're scrubbing floors, washing other people's laundry until your hands dissolve, sewing buttons until you forget what daylight looks like, all for pennies. And when those options run out, there's always the street. No sick leave, no safety, and no sympathy. Maybe you're a chimney sweep, or a mudlark, digging through the Thames at low tide, looking for scraps of rope, nails, or bones to sell. The smell is free. The dysentery? Also included. Or perhaps you've landed in a workhouse, that magical institution where the destitute are helped by being worked to the bone in exchange for food so bland it feels like a punishment. You're not here to thrive. You're here to not die too loudly. Jobs come and go. Illness doesn't. Injury means starvation. There's no workers' comp, no health insurance, and no HR department. Just a foreman yelling at you to lift faster, breathe quieter, and stop bleeding on the equipment. And heaven forbid you complain. There's always someone more desperate behind you, willing to work for even less. Competition is fierce, and compassion is scarce. So yes, you're employed, but don't get too excited. In Victorian London, a job doesn't pull you out of poverty. It just gives you something to do while you're in it. In Victorian London, childhood isn't a time of innocence. It's a short window before your back gives out and your lungs fill with soot. If you're small enough to fit inside a chimney, congratulations, you're considered employable. Forget toys and bedtime stories. By the time you're 5, you're already working. 6, if your parents are merciful. School is a luxury. Work is your future and your present. You might be a chimney sweep, crawling through narrow flues, scraping out soot while praying you don't get stuck. If you scream, they'll poke you with a stick. If you stop moving, they'll assume the worst and keep going. Or perhaps you're a match girl, dipping wooden sticks into white phosphorus that poisons your jawbone until it glows in the dark and eventually falls off. The pay? A few pence? The hazard? Bone death. A charming trade-off. Some children are mudlarks, scavenging through the toxic sludge of the Thames at low tide, looking for nails, rope, anything remotely sellable. You emerge soaked, freezing, and likely infected with something Victorian science hasn't even named yet. Others hawk newspapers on the street, shout about roasted chestnuts they can't afford, or run messages for pennies. You run fast, dodge traffic, and hope today isn't the day you're trampled by a horse or beaten for looking the wrong way at the wrong man. Factory work? That's the dream. Indoors. Steady hours. Just ignore the amputations. Children clean under whirring machines, often while they're still running. You learn fast, or you lose a hand. No safety gear, no days off, no sympathy. Just sweat, noise, and an ever-present adult barking orders. And if you're an orphan, the world doesn't owe you anything. Workhouses, the street, or worse. Some are sold into service. Others vanish, absorbed into the fog, a footnote in someone else's story. In the eyes of Victorian industry, children are cheap, obedient, and disposable. Childhood isn't stolen, it's simply never offered. And yet somehow, they survive. They play with scraps, sing songs in alleys, and laugh. Between shifts, between coughs. Because they have to. Because in London even children are expected to carry the weight of empire on their tiny, soot-covered shoulders. If you thought surviving Victorian London was hard as a man, try doing it as a woman. You work. All the time. And no, you don't get applause or medals. You get calluses, exhaustion, and a society that expects you to smile while your spine collapses. If you're unmarried, you might be a domestic servant. That means scrubbing floors from dawn till dusk, hauling buckets of coal, blacking the hearth, ironing until your arms ache, and never sitting down unless someone tells you to. You eat last, you sleep in the attic, and if the master gets handsy, well, you should feel grateful, apparently. Married? That's not better. It's double duty. You clean your own home, likely a single filthy room, raise children, usually several, cook, with nothing, sew, everything, and manage the entire household budget with 3 shillings and a prayer. And then maybe you take in laundry from richer households, boiling, scrubbing, wringing, repeating, just to buy bread. Some women become seamstresses, stitching shirts in poorly lit corners for 14 hours a day. It pays pennies. It ruins your eyesight. And if your fingers bleed on the fabric, you lose the job. And then there's the match factories, where white phosphorus eats through your jaw, quite literally. You start with a toothache and end with a rotting face. Management says it's your fault for chewing gum, when none of that pays enough, or when you're widowed, orphaned, or just unlucky. The street becomes the only option. Sex work is legal, unofficially ignored, and socially condemned. You might make enough for food and rent, or you might get arrested, attacked, or worse. Protection? Only if you count wool gloves and luck. Women in Victorian London are expected to be quiet, clean, obedient, and always busy. You're the moral centre of the home, even if the home has no floorboards, no heat, and no future. There are no rights, no maternity leave, no safety net. Just other women, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, trying to survive the same nightmare. But somehow they do. With grim determination, whispered jokes, and backs bent by centuries of unpaid labour. And still, they find time to comfort their children and sweep the doorstep, because someone has to. You might have dodged the horses, survived the soot, and even landed a job. But in Victorian London, you can't dodge disease. It's everywhere, lurking in the water, the walls, the air, and quite possibly in the meat pie you ate for lunch. Illness doesn't knock. It sits beside you on the tram, sleeps beside you in your tenement, and sneaks into your lungs while you wait in line for bread. Let's start with the basics. Tuberculosis, or consumption, as they called it, because it slowly consumes your lungs, your body, and your will to live. The cough is deep, constant, and comes with blood. Everyone knows someone who has it. Most people just keep working until they drop. Then there's cholera, which arrives through your drinking water like a particularly cruel surprise. One minute you feel fine, the next you're vomiting, dehydrated, and desperately trying not to soil yourself in public. It spreads fast. Whole streets go silent. The local pump is chained up too late. By then the damage is done. Typhoid, scarlet fever, diphtheria, all regular visitors. Each has its own personality, but they all share one thing in common. They hit the poor the hardest. If you can't afford a doctor, and you can't, you're left with herbal remedies, homemade poultices, or the magical healing properties of hope. Of course, there's always laudanum, a beloved mixture of alcohol and opium sold over the counter. You've got a fever? Take laudanum. Cramps? Laudanum. Grieving the death of your 8th child? Double dose. You'll still die, but you'll die very relaxed. And what about the doctors? Well, they mean well. Sometimes. But medicine is still guessing with Latin. Leeches are still in fashion. Surgery is done without gloves. Antiseptics are a twinkle in Lister's eye. Your odds with a street barber aren't much worse. Disease doesn't discriminate, but your living conditions help it choose you faster. No sanitation, no ventilation, 10 people to a room. It's a perfect breeding ground for microbes, misery and mould. In Victorian London, if something doesn't kill you fast, it will kill you slowly. And if you're somehow still upright, time to refill your water. You're sweating through your soot-stained shirt, your lips are dry, and your throat feels like it's been sandpapered by coal dust. Time for a drink? Sure. But in Victorian London, water isn't your friend. It's a loaded pistol with a porcelain handle. Let's start with the Thames, the lifeblood of the city. It's also the toilet, the industrial dump, the animal graveyard, and, just for good measure, the city's main drinking water source. Imagine a stew of rotting vegetables, chemical runoff, dead dogs, human waste, and expired fish, flowing right past Westminster. Now pour a cup and say cheers. Don't worry, the water company says it's filtered. That means it's passed through a mesh of gravel, wishful thinking, and possibly someone's old boot. If you live in a working-class neighbourhood, your tap might come from a public pump down the street, which you share with 200 neighbours and 3 nearby factories. And the worst part? You might not even know it's deadly, until it's too late. Cholera loves bad water. So does typhoid. They swim freely through the pipes like microscopic sharks. Whole families are taken out within days. A shared bucket, a misused chamber pot, a splash from the wrong pump, and your headline material, if you're lucky. Bathing? Now that's adorable. Most people don't have bathtubs. If you're middle class, you might share one with the family once a week. If you're poor, it's a tin tub in the kitchen once a month, if that. And that same water might double as laundry rinse, dishwater, or a place to soak your aching feet. Hygiene is creative. The government starts installing sewers eventually, thanks to the Great Stink of 1858, when the smell from the Thames was so horrific that Parliament fled the building. It took stench to make change. Until then, you boil your water when you can, or drink beer, the safe Victorian beverage for children and adults alike. Weak, warm, and slightly fizzy with salvation. So yes, in Victorian London you can die from a glass of water. The trick isn't just avoiding thirst. It's avoiding where the thirst takes you. You've tried honest work. It's long, filthy, and barely pays enough to buy yesterday's bread. The water might kill you, the factory definitely will, and the rent collector doesn't take IOUs. So what's left? Crime. And in Victorian London, it's not just an act, it's a career path. Start small. Maybe you're a pickpocket, or a dipper, as the slang goes. You blend into crowds near the markets, bump someone gently, and vanish with a pocket watch or coin purse. Charles Dickens made Oliver Twist famous, but the real-life versions didn't get musical numbers. They got sent to Newgate Prison or shipped off to Australia. If you're a woman, you might become a fence, buying and reselling stolen goods in back alleys under layers of shawls and misdirection. Or maybe you run a twilight house, where pickpockets drop their loot before the bobbies come sniffing. Feeling bold? Become a costermonger swindler, selling bruised fruit or watered-down milk from a rickety cart, disappearing before complaints catch up. Or try your hand at forgery, card tricks, or the always popular 3-card Monte, a fast-talking scam with a faster getaway. And if you've really got guts? There's always burglary. Break into a warehouse, a merchant's shop, or, if you're desperate, a church. You might find something valuable. You might also find a constable with a billy club and no bedtime. The police force exists, but they're underpaid, undermanned, and often 2 steps behind. Plus, you can bribe the right officer if you know the system. And let's face it, you probably do. Crime syndicates in London were shockingly organised. Some had territories, code words, and full recruitment pipelines. Then there's the resurrection men, body snatchers who dig up fresh graves to sell corpses to medical schools. It's gruesome. It's illegal. It pays better than sewing buttons. Of course, the consequences are real. Get caught and you could be flogged, branded, jailed, or worse, transported to a penal colony. But if the alternative is starving on a cold street, well, risk has a certain appeal. Because in Victorian London, morality comes second to hunger. Crime isn't the opposite of work. It is work. And for many, it's the only job that hires. Let's say you've caught something. A cough, a fever. Maybe your leg's been run over by a delivery cart. Time to see a doctor. Good luck. Because in Victorian London, medicine is less healing science and more creative improvisation with sharp metal. Doctors are out there, sure. Some even wear coats. But unless you're wealthy, your first stop isn't a physician. It's a chemist, where the cure for every ailment is a small bottle of laudanum, opium in liquid form, ideal for anything from a sore throat to existential dread. It won't cure you, but you'll stop caring. Can't afford a chemist? Maybe there's a barber surgeon down the road. Yes, a man who cuts hair and also amputates legs. If your wound is infected, he'll saw it off. No anaesthesia, no antiseptic, just a stick to bite and a bucket to scream into. And don't even think about hospitals. They're overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and smell like old bandages and lost hope. The instruments aren't sterilised. Surgeons wipe their hands on aprons between patients. Germ theory exists, but many still think disease is caused by bad air and moral failure. If you survive the treatment, infection may finish the job. A splinter can become a death sentence. A toothache? That's 2 days from sepsis. And childbirth? Well, women go in with pain and come out with a baby or a gravestone. Sometimes both. Medical textbooks are filled with confidence and wrong guesses. You might be prescribed bleeding, mustard plasters, or a mild electrocution to stimulate the humours. They balance the body by draining it, mostly of blood, money, and hope. There are a few progressive doctors with new ideas. Cleanliness, hand washing, maybe even antiseptics. But they're usually mocked by their peers. After all, how dare anyone imply that a gentleman doctor's hands carry germs? So what do most people do when sick? They wait. They sip herbal tea. They light a candle and lie very still. Because every treatment carries a risk, and recovery often feels more accidental than intentional. You don't go to the doctor to get better. You go because you've run out of other options. And sometimes, just sometimes, you come back out alive. The sun sets, the gas lamps flicker to life, and the fog thickens like a shroud. You might think the city calms down at night, but this is Victorian London. When the light fades, the real dangers come out. Forget cosy firesides and quiet evenings. The streets belong to shadows, and they're not empty. The gaslight barely cuts through the mist. Everything is a silhouette, a hunched figure in the alley, a cloaked shape behind a lamppost, footsteps that echo one beat too many. If you're out alone, you're either lost or you've run out of better options. The police patrol in pairs, swinging their truncheons and trying to look menacing. But even the constables know certain alleys are best left alone. Criminals own the night, and most wear shoes softer than a copper's boots. Robbers, cutthroats, and pickpockets thrive after dark. And if your route takes you through Whitechapel or Limehouse, you hold your breath and walk faster. Not because of ghosts, though the fog does play tricks, but because someone might be watching. And in 1888, he might have a knife. If you're a woman, the danger triples. Men leer from corners. Offers are whispered. Some follow. Others don't bother whispering. The darkness hides everything. Faces, screams, and sometimes bodies. Even if you stay indoors, you're not always safe. Tenement buildings creak and groan. Rats scratch behind walls. Arguments erupt 2 floors down and end with breaking glass or breaking bones. Sometimes someone vanishes, and no one asks why. And let's not forget the fires. Chimneys spark, stoves tip, a knocked-over oil lamp ignites a sleeping mat. No smoke alarms, no fire brigade that arrives in minutes. just neighbours shouting and throwing buckets into a blaze they can't control. If you must venture out, you carry a candle or a lantern and hope the flame doesn't blow out in the wind. Or worse, draw attention. Because in Victorian London, night isn't rest, it's risk. The poor don't sleep peacefully. They sleep light, one eye open, one ear tuned to the creak of stairs. And for many, morning is just something to survive to. The morning arrives, or at least you assume it does. Because in Victorian London, light isn't so much seen as guessed at through the thick, suffocating smog. It rolls in like a living thing, a grey, greasy mist made of coal smoke, fog, chimney ash, and the weary sighs of 1,000 overworked boilers. It wraps around buildings, slinks into cracks, and settles in your lungs like a squatter who refuses to leave. You cough, again. You never really stopped. The smog irritates your throat, clings to your skin, and makes your eyelashes feel sticky. Everyone coughs. It's part of the daily soundtrack, along with the church bells, the clip-clop of hooves, and someone yelling about turnips. You wipe the windows. The cloth comes away black. You wash your hands. The water turns grey. Your clothes, no matter how often they're scrubbed, always smell faintly of smoke and despair. Even your curtains are stained with soot. They hang heavy and stiff, like they've seen too much. You think about opening the window. Then you remember what's outside. More smoke, more filth, and the smell of 12 chimney fires fighting for dominance. The worst of it? This is normal. Londoners live in a permanent twilight. The sun is a rumour. People squint to read. Children grow pale. Plants on windowsills die of asphyxiation. And don't even think about drying laundry outside unless you enjoy wearing soot-stained shirts with a hint of arsenic. During the infamous Great Smogs, the air becomes so dense that you can't see your own feet. People get lost walking home. Omnibuses crash. Boats collide on the Thames. In 1873, one fog lasted for 5 straight days and left over 270 people dead. The city barely noticed. The poor, of course, get it worse. Their fires burn cheap, dirty coal. Their walls are thin. Their lungs weaker. Children wheeze through winter like old dogs. If you reach adulthood without bronchitis, consumption, or mysterious blackened phlegm, you're a miracle. And yet, you go on. You light the stove. You step outside. You pretend not to taste the air. Because in Victorian London, the smog never ends. It just waits for you. You'd be forgiven for thinking Victorian London was all soot, sickness, and screaming. And mostly, you'd be right. But even in the dirtiest corners, under the weight of poverty and fog, something human still flickers. Because kindness, oddly enough, survives here too, though you often have to squint to see it. You might spot it in the shared loaf of bread passed quietly between neighbours, when one family runs out before payday, or in the woman who gives her last halfpenny to a barefoot child with bloodied feet. There's no reward, just a nod, and maybe a smile, rare and precious. Even in the darkest places, the tenements, the alleys, the workhouses, people look out for each other. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough to prove that the city hasn't broken them completely. A mother shares her hot brick on a freezing night. A chimney sweep helps a new boy not get stuck on his first climb. A dying man gives his boots to someone who still has the strength to work. These aren't grand gestures. They're small, quiet, but they matter more than gold in a place where hope is a rationed luxury. The pubs help too. They're loud, smelly, overcrowded, and absolutely essential. It's where people gather to sing, to joke, to drink away their bruises and their sorrow. You might not afford meat, but you can share a laugh over watery ale. Even the street performers, the penny dreadful sellers, the blind fiddler at the corner, they all form a kind of patchwork comfort, reminders that not everything in the city is out to hurt you. Kindness here isn't naive. It's practical. It's born of shared suffering. Because when the system forgets you, when the rich pretend you don't exist, your only safety net is each other. And so, despite everything, the filth, the fever, the fog, people still love, still marry, still raise children, still hope. Because if you can find kindness in the gutter, a warm hand in the cold, a crust of bread, a half-hummed lullaby, then maybe the city hasn't won. Not yet. So, after 14 chapters of choking smog, rats in the walls, toxic water, and toothless chemists prescribing opium for a broken leg, ask yourself, honestly, would you survive Victorian London? Probably not. Let's be clear. This wasn't a city built for comfort. It was built on coal, sweat, and the crushed spines of the working poor. Every day was a battle. Against hunger, against disease, against landlords, factory foremen, constables, and the constant creep